Hi, Martha here, and it's Monday, the 19th of May, aka day 116 of Donald Trump's second term. And as we do every Monday, I'm speaking to someone who can bring us a different perspective on Donald Trump, his politics, or his personality. But before we get into that, we should mention some news that broke late this weekend. Former President Joe Biden has been diagnosed with an aggressive form of prostate cancer, which has spread to his bones. A statement for his office said the president and his family are reviewing treatment options with his physicians, and the cancer appears to be hormone sensitive, which allows for effective management. This is a huge political moment as concerns about his health plagued Biden throughout his time in office. He's 82 now and was the oldest person to ever serve as president. Time and again, the perception of his infirmity stood in his way, particularly during his campaign for re-election last year. President Trump has posted on Truth Social, reacting to the news. He said, "Melania and I are saddened to hear about Joe Biden's recent medical diagnosis. We extend our warmest and best wishes to Jill and the family, and we wish Joe a fast and successful recovery." Meanwhile, Kamala Harris, who was Biden's vice president, said, "Doug and I are saddened to learn of President Biden's prostate cancer diagnosis. We're keeping him, Dr. Biden, and their entire family in our hearts and prayers during this time. Joe is a fighter, and I know he will face this challenge with the same strength, resilience, and optimism that have always defined his life and leadership." We'll talk more about Joe Biden's health on the podcast this week. But for now, let's go back to our guest for this episode, Ambassador Barbara Leaf. She was the US ambassador to the United Arab Emirates from 2014 to 2018, which means she was in the role for the start of Trump's first term. Later, she was appointed by the Biden administration to represent the US in the Middle East, and just last year was part of the team that formed the first formal US presence in Syria after more than a decade, where she met the new Syrian president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, who of course had a surprise meeting with Trump last week. Barbara, thank you ever so much for joining us on Trump 100. Barbara, I'm assuming you've been following Donald Trump's visit to...
Avidly, yes, like everyone else in Washington.
Over 4 days, Donald Trump visited Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates, places you know well. This was the first foreign trip of his second term. The White House, as you might expect, is touting it as an unbridled success, trumpeting various financial investments that he's secured. But notably, no apparent breakthroughs on Russia, Ukraine, or Israel, Gaza.
Right.
How do you think it went?
So I would look at it from a number of different perspectives. So for him personally, as president, it was a runaway success for U.S. business. It was a series of unbridled successes from Riyadh to Doha to Abu Dhabi. And for those foreign leaders, I think each of them, without question, I've talked to officials from all those governments, they also regard the trip as a huge success. Mm-hmm. From the regional policy side of things, the shock announcement, the shock photo op of the president with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and the interim Syrian president and former jihadist, former inmate of a U.S. detention facility in Iraq, Ahmed al-Sharaa. That was the big surprise of the week. But you're right. There was a miss in terms of Ukraine.
You mentioned there that meeting with the Syrian president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, who the US once called an al-Qaeda terrorist. And until 10 months ago, the US had a bounty on his head. How unusual is that?
Until December 20th, when I conveyed to him that we were lifting it. Yes.
You met him December. Yes. As you were part of this first US diplomatic presence in Syria for a decade. What was your impression of the Syrian president?
So, look, it was 12 days after Bashar al-Assad had fled in the night. The country was in a state of what I could only describe as ecstatic jubilation. And you felt it with every Syrian that you met. He came across... he conveyed a very quiet and strong charisma, frankly. But also, he came across as somebody deeply serious about the topics that we went through for an hour and a half, ranging from the state of Syria's Kurds and how they would integrate into the unified state, terrorism issues, economic issues, U.S. sanctions, and so forth. And throughout it all, he came across as somebody decidedly non-ideological, or
Mhm.
at least that did not figure in any of the conversation.
Were you surprised to see President Trump meeting with President Shara so publicly?
Um, so the rumors had been out there, and I had given them about a 50-50 chance of happening. I knew that the Saudis had weighed in at a very senior level
Mhm.
to on the whole issue of sanctions. I mean, there were also rumors that he was going to meet a senior Iranian official, which I thought was entirely unlikely. But I figured it was a 50-50 chance. And certainly this was a huge surprise, a huge get as far as regional audiences were concerned.
What, if anything, do you know about what they spoke about during their meeting?
They had a very preliminary discussion, which hit the sort of the top couple of issues for, frankly, for any president, for any American president, and that's terrorism. I mean, after all, that's why we have a small but hardy and resilient set of U.S. forces there in northeast Syria to help the Syrians contest this face with ISIS. So terrorism for sure. Touched on the issue of Israel and the aspiration that Donald Trump has that eventually there are normalized relations with Israel, and sanctions, of course. Although the president had already announced it, but I think Sharar was at pains to demonstrate in that conversation, as he had with me, that he intends to make Syria, the new Syria, a friend to everyone, and certainly not a threat to any of its neighbors, including Israel.
You worked obviously under the Biden administration as well. Can you envisage any situation in which President Biden would have met with President al-Shara?
Well, certainly not so soon. No,
Mhm.
no. But from what I've observed as an American over time, uh, Trump likes surprises. He likes to pull a rabbit out of the hat. Yeah, I mean, it was a twofer. I mean, and you could hear it in the audience. You got a huge response to the announcement of sanctions. He could have left it there. Uh, but he's, obviously he likes visuals too. By the way, President Trump took his own staff by surprise back in Washington.
Really? They weren't
Yeah.
expecting this meeting to happen?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes. It is remarkable. It is unusual.
Yeah,
Look
so
at
many things are with this president.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Did he just want good headlines, good PR from this trip rather than lasting diplomatic resolutions?
His first and foremost priority was to demonstrate the vitality of these economic ties to the benefit of the United States.
Mhm.
So you saw that two-way sort of investment propositions with, a 10 square mile AI campus being unveiled as a project that will deeply involve U.S. firms in Abu Dhabi. But the White House was at pains to say at every stop that there would be large flows of money going the other way. And indeed, we saw that um, during visits by Saudi and UAE officials to Washington.
You know how Donald Trump operates. It's often said he does business with people he likes. And he had a lot of warm words for the leaders of the Gulf
Yes.
countries that he
Yes.
visited last week. He did a lot of deals. What
Yes.
is it about these leaders that he likes? And does he see a kinship in them?
First of all, he's known each of them for some time. His folks around him, including Steve Witkoff, have known the leaders for some time. The degree of warmth that he demonstrated obviously resonated in each capital. It's pretty simple. He likes each of them. He feels he knows each of them to
Mhm.
considerable degree.
Mhm.
He loves the fact that there are opportunities to get them to invest in the United States, which is a priority for him right now. He loves the bling.
Does he see some of himself in them?
That's hard to say. I'm not a psychiatrist
The
here.
the bling the bling especially though, because, he's been putting gold all around the Oval
Yeah,
Office.
yeah, yeah.
Does he, you know, is there
No,
an
it
image of
feels so,
himself in
but
them?
clearly, I mean, it resonates. He feels very much at his element there.
Mhm. Were you surprised that he seemed so taken by the new Syrian president? He called him this young, attractive guy.
Um, look, I can say you feel the charisma.
Mhm.
Uh, he does exude it. It's hard to explain how you feel charisma with one person and not with another. He is definitely somebody who conveys that. It's he's got a very serious demeanor. And so when he cracks a smile or whatever, there's a certain charm to it.
Mhm.
Clearly, I would describe the meeting as kind of festive
Mhm.
because coming in on the back end of the president announcing the day before that, boom, all sanctions go. And I
Mhm.
don't think in his wildest dreams Ahmed al-Sharaa could have could have imagined
Mhm.
that all of those layers of sanctions would be lifted at one go. Of course, it's going to be an elaborate process to do so because it involves getting a piece of U.S. law repealed. But
Mhm.
the atmosphere itself was very festive. He's a striking figure, Ahmed al-Sharaa.
Mhm. What was
Yeah.
he like with you? Did you like him? Were you taken by him in the same way that Trump seems to have been?
I never compare myself to Donald J. Trump. Though. Let me just start and that clarification. But also, when you're in my position, you're a diplomat. You try to school your emotions,
Mhm.
especially when you're meeting, former jihadists, somebody who is, military commander of a coalition of, extremist forces, and his own force, which is designated as a foreign terrorist organization. I normally do leaven my even the heavy diplomatic discussions with humor. I can't help it, but it's a way to sort of disarm and put people at ease and then have a serious discussion, including about very scratchy issues. What I was constantly struck by, it was clear that he had really, really done his homework. And he
Mhm.
wasn't sort of spewing, as we call them, talking points.
Mhm.
We had a very thoughtful conversation. And when we got to things like sanctions, which we touched on a couple of times, we were sort of in a friendly tennis match. He has a very, very discernible sense of himself. He's a military commander. He's a guy who's been in a sort of militia uniform since he was, half his life, really.
Mhm.
He was a very young man, 20 or so, 19,
Mhm.
went to Iraq. So I expected something different, sort of a
Mhm.
kind of an aggressive military guy.
Yeah.
He wasn't that way at all. He was clearly a political leader. He had already kind
Mhm.
of transformed in that sense.
Mhm. Other foreign leaders of countries which are traditional allies to the US, obviously notably President Zelensky, have fallen foul of these first meetings
Mhm.
with Donald Trump. Whereas here you have a former designated terrorist who
You know,
seems to get
it
on
is
so well with him.
no, you really have to stop and think about this one. Okay, first he was with ISIS, then he went back to Syria and he joined up with Al Qaeda and opened up the franchise there for Al Qaeda. Now he's fighting them both, but still he's got some very dodgy people in his big
Yeah.
tent. So yeah, it was kind of astonishing, really.
Does it show how much things are changing under Donald Trump, how much the world order is shifting, and how much relations in the Middle East are shifting?
Well, one thing I can say about, the Middle East, relationships are not just something, they're everything.
Mhm.
Things start and end with how good your relationship is with somebody.
It's the way Trump operates too, isn't it, though?
Yeah,
Personal relationships for him are
yeah,
paramount as well. That's how he does business.
that's right. This is the way he approaches things. It's all about relationships.
Mhm.
You can argue with that approach because that does not always serve and certainly doesn't serve around the world. And, You do need institutions, and there's a reason for process for high policy decision making. But there are occasions where a president will go rogue and make a decision, and his staff are left catching up.
Just finally, Barbara, what do you think will be the long-lasting effects of this first foreign trip for Donald Trump?
So look, I will rewind the videotape a little bit here on the discussions on AI in particular. And there were major deals that were either inked or culminated or proposed for the future. The sort of what I would say the Biden administration effectively did, and then this locks it in, is the orientation of these two important partners towards the U.S. for the future technology future for AI, and shall we say, in an easterly direction.
And would you say there were any major failings of this trip? Obviously, no breakthrough on Russia, Ukraine, or Israel, Gaza, but was the groundwork simply not there for this trip?
No, I mean, and that's why I think that President Trump spoke very little about either issue, but this he was focused on the good news for the American public of all of these business deals being inked. And that's not a bad thing, but I didn't expect that Gaza was going to be sorted this week. I didn't even think that there would be a breakthrough on just another set of hostages being released. They're very stuck at this point.
That's brilliant. Thank you ever so much for your time, Ambassador Barbara Leaf.
Thank you so much.
That's it for today. And if you have any questions for me and the team, you can email us at trump100@sky.uk. And if you're not already, please do follow us wherever you're listening. But for now, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you tomorrow for another day of Trump 100.